Brother Miller has passed away. He is in heaven now, but he was very noted about the Singer trilogy. Was his view, and I think he probably got that from C.S. Lewis, that when God created the world, he sang it into existence. And so God is the singer. God is the singer. And you might enjoy that. I don't know. I did. And it's one of those things that I've probably read a couple of times. And I don't know what possessed me.
Yeah, and you have the gift of remembering what you read.
I had a friend that lived many years ago. His name was Jack Akery. And Jack, literally, he was anything he had ever read. He knew the author, the title of the book, and he could quote passages in the book. And I just refused to debate with him or to argue with him because he just was so knowledgeable. But I try to emulate that, and I did have a good. I'll tell you though something about me, and just in case you ever said, "Well, I wish I knew more about Brother John." Nobody ever says that. When I have a nightmare, it's usually of me just losing my memory, losing my cognitive skills. I guess I was always athletic and active and strong in my youth, and I've had to say goodbye to all of that. I remember even years ago now, I was going to run the bases with some little kids at the ball field, and I nearly killed myself. And I began to, it was even then I started saying, you're not a kid anymore. Well, I still am very happy to have what I think of as a good functional mind. I can still think. And my greatest fear, and you know, I have so many loved ones and friends and people that I've ministered to who just kind of drifted away. You know, their personality went, and then that could happen to any of us. I read everything that I can about, you know, they're making progress on Alzheimer's, and they're curing this, and then sometimes it says, don't eat this. This has been linked to Alzheimer's or dementia. But I don't think they really know much. I don't see much evidence that they're making great strides. And honestly, the people that I've been closest to who kind of disappeared mentally, they seem to be happy. Maybe that's in my mind. They don't worry about the bills anymore, or about their job, or about deadlines. They smile a lot. They don't seem to fret as much as I do. I do remember, though, my grandmother Bain. She suffered from dementia in her latter years, and her children, and I loved, of course, my dad and my uncle and my aunt. I loved them dearly. Lost someone who was just like an uncle to me this weekend, and but they would get very, very upset. My grandmother, she might ask you 50 times a day what day it is and what time is it. She'd ask you who you are, and who are you again? And they would sometimes, it broke their heart, really. But the way they expressed it most often was they got angry with her and scolded her for, you know what, today I told you 5 minutes ago. You know, if you ever, let me just say that I'm not a psychologist, and I didn't even stay in a Holiday Inn Express last night, but if you have a family member and they ask you who you are, just tell them who you are. If they ask you 5 minutes ago what time it is, and they asking you again or what day it is, just tell them. And if they have a notion of something that is, and my dad had an idea that people were coming to get him, I'd say, I'm right here, Daddy. If they come to get you, they'll have to get us both. I didn't say no, nobody's coming to get you. I didn't argue with them. So anyway, that's the way dealing with that. But audiobooks, I listen to them, and sometimes I like to write books. I write books, and I publish a lot of books. And every once in a while, and I'll just say, when I'm publishing a book, or it's ready, I published one at the first of the year on Amazon. And then I get kind of a glimpse of how many books are out there. I'm thinking, nobody's ever going to read this, or this is just, there are like bajillions of books. Does the world need another book? But anyway, writing them is good therapy for me. And every once in a while, somebody might read it. And if not, nothing else, it is perhaps it will be. It is a. I know without any question that is a part of me that's going to still be present when I'm gone. So that's something too. Well, hello. Is anybody out there? Ned and Betsy, I got a text from her this morning, I think, or something on Facebook. Said they're leaving Las Vegas tonight, and I'm sure their Pamela and them is going, boy, I thought they'd never leave. But then Ned and Betsy may say, let's hurry up, let's get out of here. We got to get back home. Hope our goldfish are still alive, but pray them safely home. They got a long way to drive. Driving to Las Vegas, I'd have to love Carice a whole lot to drive to Las Vegas. I don't know if I love her that much or not. I might just do FaceTime. Henry and Linda. Today is Linda's birthday. Linda, if you're tuned in out there, happy birthday to you. I know Henry and Linda. I mentioned last week that Andy helped repair a plumbing problem we had there, but we had a lot of water damage, and we have about a $300 water bill. But you know, those we just boy, I was really amazed after our heat went out the very first day of that bitter cold, and we didn't have any heat at all. And through our heating system, we did have electricity though, and so we went and borrowed some heaters from Carice and Brian, and we survived. And then the next day, the heat was working. I was just surprised that we didn't have water springing out everywhere after. I saw a meme on Instagram the other day. It says, "Yeah," he was talking to the weather, and he said, "Yeah, just go ahead. You acting all warm and summery and acting like you didn't try to kill us about 2 days ago. You know, so just go right ahead." But you know, it was just bitter cold, and then I was surprised, and so I honestly I didn't know what havoc might be wreaked here at the church, and it was evidently quite a bit. If you kind of go back down through here, a lot of carpet's been ripped out, you know, telling what all was wet and soggy. Linda Martin is Terry's aunt, her father's sister. Is probably going into rehab. She's coming out of a bout with pneumonia and other problems she had. Just a very important person in our family. It was Grady Bain who passed away this weekend. He kind of had a fall, and you know, sometimes people fall and we say, well, they fell, and that's what happened. But you know, what made him fall? He probably had a heart attack or a stroke or something that made him fall. You know, so say someone broke their hip. Well, it's not that they fell and broke their hip; it's that their hip broke, and that's what made them fall. Just a bone can just break, so we don't know. But anyway, he didn't survive. He grew up. He was like my dad's little brother, and there were my Uncle Howard and my dad. The family called him Walt and Grady. They were like the three amigos growing up. And they are finally together again. My dad was the first of the three who went away. And during that time, my dad was very good about going and seeing his brothers and visiting them often, as he was still able. But when my dad passed, my Uncle Howard could not hear. He was bedfast. He was suffering from dementia. And my aunt, Dean, went just kind of crawled up on the edge of the bed with him and took him by the hand. And I said he couldn't hear a lick, was losing his ability to speak. And he looked in her face and he said, Walt's gone, isn't he? And she just nodded her head. And he knew that Daddy was gone. Well, Uncle Howard was not too far behind, and now Grady is gone. So I don't know anything about the arrangements. Pray for our family, and Terry's family and mine. Hey, look. Linda's birthday today. Leona Ward, her birthday is the 10th. My birthday is the 13th. So we've got some few birthdays. There's a new prayer warrior out, so if you can think, and there are new editions of our Daily Bread available. I'm loading you down with stuff to read, Barbara. It's kind of, I put this together and published it last night. I know that there's probably someone out there that every time I publish a prayer warrior, they say, look there, you misspelled my name again, or look right there, that's not my birthday at all. And, just tell me. You're not going to hurt my feelings or make me mad. But a lot of people, would just rather gripe than to help me out. So help me out. I get lots of stuff wrong all the time. And what's worse is I publish it. I don't print it. Well, spent most of our Sunday school hour. We haven't met for the last 2 Sundays. We're in John's Gospel, and one of the chapters that we should have discussed was chapter 3. It's probably maybe the most important, not only the important chapter, most important chapter in the Gospel of John, maybe one of the most important chapters in the whole Bible. This is where Nicodemus comes to Jesus and has a conversation. He is desperately he desperately wants Jesus to be the Messiah, but it seems so unlikely. And he is kind and gracious enough that he wants to talk with Jesus. In today's time, I don't think people sit down with people that they disagree with and talk and ask questions and discuss. We seem to not only disagree with each other these days, we decide to hate each other. And we not only think the person who disagrees with us is wrong, we think he's stupid. And, to give that person some of our time or to allow them to tweet on Twitter seems to be some kind of violation of good sense. I am a strong believer in freedom of speech, and I believe you ought to also even be allowed to say things that are wrong. My goodness, if only the right people could talk, be awfully quiet. Let all the people who are wrong, let them have their say. Yes, the earth is flat, and NASA never really has been to the moon. And the planet Nibiru is just behind the sun, and it'll soon come out, and we'll all see it. And we all know that it was the CIA that actually had John F. Kennedy assassinated. Come on, it's have your say. Should you be able to say ugly and unkind things? Sure. The Bible deals with how we're supposed to respond if people calls us names or says ugly. Should you be able to tell people that you hate them? Should you be able to say, let me just be honest with you, Barbara. I don't see hardly how you could criticize a Jewish person these days. If you didn't like what he was wearing, you'd say, man, I don't like that hat you're wearing. And he'd say, well, you're just anti-Semitic. No, I just don't like your hat. And, you can just really be ostracized. I learned this week the origin of that word, to be ostracized. I can't even tell you at church. I probably wouldn't even tell you if we were all by ourselves somewhere, Barbara, but if you're interested, where does the word ostracize come from? And I'm thinking, oh man, that's awful. But anyway, we ostracize people. But the greater danger is not that someone will say something hateful or unkind, or that people will disseminate things. In the last 2 years, lots of people were silenced because they were spreading misinformation. Well, guess what? All of that was true. Everything that was being said, that was being labeled misinformation, they're coming out. I have a different theory on that too. But even the modern, the mainstream media coming out today said, there might be something about that Hunter Biden laptop thing. And they say, we've been telling you for 2 years. You just now a light coming on. I'll tell you that I like conspiracy theories that have conspiracy theories. This is one. I believe that more and more Democrats are going to start pointing the finger at the president's son, Hunter Biden. And I think they're going to be talking more and more about that laptop. And it's not because they're finally coming around to the truth about the illegality. I think they don't want Joe Biden to run for president in 2024. The Democrats do not want him to be their candidate. So they're going to have to destroy him. And that's my theory. I don't think they're interested in the truth at all, or about justice and the Hunter Biden story. I think they find themselves, well, this is the way to get rid of Joe Biden. We've got to turn on him and say, oh no, we need to look at that. So that's the only reason I think they're doing that, because I don't know who their candidate is going to be. I can't run Hillary again. Well, that's enough of politics. When Jesus talking with Nicodemus, and that's where Jesus says, Nicodemus, you got some really great questions, and you're thinking a lot of important ways. He says, but I'm just going to blow past all of that. Nicodemus said, we know that you're a man sent from God, because no man could do these miracles that you're doing except God be with him. Jesus said, Nicodemus, you got to be born again, or you'll never get to heaven. In other words, that's really the burning thing in your. But the most important thing is not about what you believe about. He said, you might think it would be crucial to believe that I'm come from God and that God helped. What you need to do is be born again. That's the most important thing. You got to be redone. There has to be a rejuvenation, a regeneration. Human beings cannot just come along and make the right decisions or decide to believe the right things. We've got to be redone. We've got to be recreated. Now, the rebirth. And the thing about it is, Jesus in his mind was not dropping something brand new and exotic on Nicodemus for him to consider. Jesus looked at Nicodemus and said, are you a ruler in Israel and you don't know what I'm talking about? In other words, Jesus was saying, this is not new. If you're a ruler in Israel, then when I say you have to be born again, that shouldn't be new to you. It ought to be something that you're acquainted with. Now, regeneration or rebirth or being born again is not mentioned. It is not written. But the concept, the principle, Jesus says, this has always been, just like God created Adam, you've got to be recreated to become a child of God. In the fourth chapter of John starts out, and I tell you what, Barbara, all that reverberates in my mind. Let me just show you. In chapter 4 of John, verse 1, when therefore the Lord knew how the Pharisees had heard that Jesus made and baptized more disciples than John, though Jesus himself baptized not, but his disciples, he left Judea and departed again unto Galilee. And he said, when he got to Galilee, that kind of gave him, he says, here we are in Galilee. And they say, oh yeah, here we are. That was a province, and that's where Nazareth was. That's where Capernaum, Bethsaida, in Galilee. He says, the reason we came to Galilee is that we're going to Samaria. It says, in verse 4, he said he must needs go through Samaria. Now, we just finished a year or maybe even 2 years looking into Old Testament books, Isaiah and, Hosea and Amos and those guys. And that whole story that we brushed up against there is crucial to this right here. When Assyria came down in about 325 or 326 BC, and they just leveled the northern kingdom, which was the 10 tribes that made up the nation of Israel. Remember, Israel and Judah split. There was Saul, and then David, and then David's son Solomon. After Solomon died, the kingdom split into 10 tribes and the 2 tribes, Israel and Judah. Well, Assyria came in and they just obliterated the capital of the northern kingdom was in Shechem. When Jesus, it says in verse 5, he went to Sychar. Well, that's the new name of Shechem. When the sons of Solomon started their own kingdoms, they built a Rehoboam, founded his kingdom, the capital in Shechem. That's where the royal palace was. It's here in Sychar. So they're in what used to be the ancient capital. But when the Assyrians came down, they just laid everything to waste. And they gathered up a lot of people, as we saw that they did. Ezekiel was kidnapped. Daniel was kidnapped and taken back to serve as slaves. And they also, when in that vacuum of stealing away all of those people, they took strong people. They took military people and craftsmen and artisans, intelligent, well-educated people, people who could teach, read and teach, write. And so in that vacuum, just all of the riffraff from everywhere fell into that hole. They just came in. There wasn't any military. There wasn't any police. It came like the Badlands. There was no law. There were no governors. It was just, when the Assyrians came in, they just came in there and ransacked everything and then left. And so there were Jewish people left. And then people came in, all kinds of people came in from everywhere. Well, those people built a new society. People got tired of murdering, killing, and pillaging, found out there wasn't anything to steal, wasn't anything of value, but here we are, we might as well stay. And they married each other, and they lived next door to each other, and they swapped gods, and they swapped languages, and they customs, and they actually became they became Samaritans. And the same thing really happened in Judah. But what happened was this, that when the Babylonian emperor, the Persian emperor turned all the slaves loose, millions of people left captivity and came back to Jerusalem. And we have the story of Ezra came back and built back the temple. And Nehemiah came back and they rebuilt the walls of Jerusalem. And so they came back, and when they were in captivity, they kind of established themselves. They rehearsed themselves on what we believe and who we are. And when they came back, they found this hodgepodge of ragtag, mixed breed people there as well. But then they just kind of came in and they became the influence. And so the people that developed in that society there despised the Samaritans because they looked like they had sold out, looked like traitors, half-breeds. Your daddy's a Phoenician, or you're a Hittite. That's who the Samaritans were. The Jewish people wouldn't associate with them all. The very fact that Jesus said, well, I got to go to Samaria. Well, Jews never said, I got to go to Samaria. I'm going to Samaria. I have some friends who are black, and they talk about going to Coleman. There aren't any black people in Coleman. Well, there really are. But they say, if you're not from around there and you're black, don't wait till the sun goes down. There are still some places here in the South that are very, very white, and black people are frowned upon there. We've still got a ways to go. Well, they hated the Samaritans, and they decided, we're not going to talk to them. We're not going to acknowledge them. They didn't trade with them. They didn't say, we'll sell you stuff. No, we're not selling you anything. We're not sending you any aid. We're not sending you any diplomats. We don't want to know who you are or what you're doing, and that's the way with things were when we come to Jesus' day. He says, I got to go to Samaria. The amazing thing is when he gets there, it is very obvious that the reason he's there is to talk to this one woman. Well, there it is again. Don't talk to women. Women have nothing to say. Women are not important. What a woman thinks doesn't matter. Why would you engage in a conversation with a woman? She can't own anything. She can't run for office. She can't vote. She's just property. Why would you have a conversation with a strange woman? Jesus said, no. And the thing about it is, this woman he asked her for a drink of water, it seems, and she says, who are you, being a Jew, asking me, a Samaritan, for a drink? She was just, you got to be kidding. You want me to give you a drink? And she just was already getting mad at him. She had been ostracized because of her circumstances in her life. But they still had a conglomeration of religion that was mixed with Judaism. And so we're waiting. And she said, she tried to have a theological discussion with Jesus, but she said, I know that the way I see things and what the Jews say doesn't match. But when the Messiah comes, he's going to straighten all this out. And Jesus said, I that speak to thee am he. That's the most amazing thing, that in Jesus' earthly public ministry, the very first person that he point blank, just openly, without any hemming or hawing, said, I'm the Messiah. The first person he told that to was a woman, and she was a Samaritan woman. I that speak to thee am he. Later on, when he was on trial, he wouldn't even tell Pilate that he was the Messiah or that he was the King of the Jews. And when he's under examination at the house of Caiaphas, they asked him a bunch of questions. He refused to give them an answer. He told this woman, he said, I'm the Messiah. I think we as Christians, we still have a lot of rules. There are still a lot of people that we think that God wants us not to like. There's still a lot of people we think of, we shouldn't associate with those Samaritan kind of people because God doesn't like them. Those people are not moral, or those people are not kosher, or those people are not who they should be. And so we have lots of rules about who we should associate with as Christians. Jesus just completely blows that out of the water. I'm going to close with this. This is kind of an unlikely thing. In watching The Chosen, this is one of my favorite episodes. I can't remember. It's season 1, and when the woman at the well, the woman from Samaria, because it says something about what Jesus believes is the truth about. We were talking before the cameras began rolling about marriage and divorce among our friends, family, our loved ones, and the heavenly state. There's something very important said. Jesus and this woman's having a conversation, and finally he just kind of cuts the conversation short. He says, "Well, go and get your husband. Bring your husband here." And she says, "Well, I don't have a husband." Jesus said, "Well, that's right. That's true. You don't have a husband. You've had 5 husbands. And the person you're living with right now is not your husband." Now, we have a thing. I have seen church councils that have refused to ordain someone into pastoral ministry because he's been divorced. Well, he's had 2 wives. And the Bible says that in order to be a deacon or to be a pastor, you can't be the husband. You have to be the husband of 1 wife. And so we say, well, if you've been divorced, that woman is your ex-wife, and now you've got another wife. Then sometimes people have 2 ex-wives. What Jesus is saying right here is, when you divorce someone, they're not your husband anymore. She says, "I don't have a husband." Jesus said, "Well, that's right, you don't have a husband." This woman had been married 5 times, and Jesus said, "You do not have a husband," because she had divorced them all. So that really blows out of the water what a lot of Baptists believe about marriage and divorce. Jesus wasn't here to scold her for marrying a lot of people. He wasn't here to berate her because she was living with someone who wasn't her husband. He needed to save her. He needed to change her life. He needed to be her Messiah. And in order to get around that, he had to get around her sin. It didn't mean he approved of her life, or that he could look at the way she had lived her life and say, "Oh yeah, you've been doing a real good job." He didn't do that at all. Jesus always disapproved of sin. He always knew that sinners needed to answer to their sin. Don't ever have an image that, yes, Jesus loved sinners and he associated with them, but he wasn't sitting around chumming around with them approving of their sin. Doesn't approve of my sin. This woman's life was changed, and Jesus had to cut through a lot of social, cultural, religious, historical, moral barriers to get to that woman, and he did it all. I'll tell you this, Barbara, maybe you and I were talking about this, but I know me and Terry was. There's a lot of things for us we've got to decide about what a woman is and what a man is. Transgenderism, who can use which bathroom. It all seems very, very simple and cut and dried until you just look at it seriously. And unless you know somebody who's in that circumstance. People who are heterosexual, people who are homosexual, people who are gay or straight. A lot of things for us to have to decide morally these days. And sometimes I just look up to heaven and I say, Lord, if you were here, and you are here, but I mean, if you were here in a physical way like you were in those days, it seemed that you were able to have a relationship with people who needed you. And maybe you offended some people, but you were able to always say and do the right thing. And I think sometimes we don't. Nothing is easy. But what I want to do, there are so many different ways that we can exclude people or eject people or reject people, or we can there are so many different ways. Even when they brought that woman to Jesus who'd been caught in adultery, the law said that she should be stoned to death. Jesus, in spite of what the Bible says, and that very, very, very tense situation, Jesus was able to save her life, and I believe he saved her soul. And he can still do that today. So often, though, I think I get in the way. All right, I want to report on all those books next Sunday.
Maybe not next Sunday. I will read them.
Don't worry about it. I'm just teasing, and I hope that if you do get a chance to read them, you enjoy them.